You sit in a room full of people debating loudly, but you feel no pull to join the noise. Not because you're detached or superior, because you've learned that silence often carries more weight than words proving you're right. And somehow, this feels natural now. That shift. It didn't happen overnight. It came from years of making hard choices, facing uncomfortable truths, and refusing to stay who you were when growth demanded more. An advanced soul isn't about enlightenment or perfection. It's about having walked through enough fire to know which battles matter and which don't. It's wisdom earned through struggle, not handed down from books. The Stoics understood this. They didn't seek spiritual transcendence. They sought practical wisdom through living deliberately. This isn't about being better than others. It's about recognizing growth you've already achieved, often without realizing it. The shifts in how you think, how you respond, how you move through the world. These are markers of evolution most people never reach because they're too busy avoiding the pain that creates it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts." Advanced souls have mastered this, not by controlling circumstances, but by mastering their response to them. Today, we'll walk through 11 signs that mark an advanced soul through the lens of Stoicism. Not mystical traits or vague feelings, observable patterns of thought and behavior. Sign number 7 is the one most people miss. It looks like weakness, but it's actually the ultimate form of strength. If you're ready to see what you've become through the struggles you've survived, let's begin. Sign number 1. You no longer need to be right. There was a time when being wrong felt like losing. Someone would challenge your opinion, and your entire body would tense. You'd dig in, defend, counterattack, not because truth mattered, but because your ego couldn't tolerate the possibility that you might not know everything. But something shifted. Now when someone disagrees with you, there's no war inside. You can listen. You can say, "I hadn't considered that," or even, "You're right," without feeling like you've surrendered anything important. I watched this transformation in myself. After years of unnecessary battles, I used to argue about everything: politics, philosophy, even which route was faster to the grocery store. Every conversation was a competition I had to win. Then one day, a friend said something that stopped me. "You'd rather be right than have a relationship." He was right. And for the first time, I didn't fight back. I just sat with how much damage my need to be right had done. That was the beginning of letting it go. Here's what changes when you release the need to be right. Conversations become exchanges instead of battlegrounds. You ask questions instead of delivering statements. You can change your mind in real time without shame, because learning matters more than appearing flawless. People stop avoiding you because every interaction isn't an endurance test. Epictetus taught, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." Advanced souls understand this. Being provoked requires your participation. When you stop defending your ego, there's nothing to provoke. You can hear criticism, absorb what's useful, discard what isn't, and move forward without carrying the weight of needing everyone to agree with you. Here's how you know you've reached this level. You can have a debate, discover you're wrong, and feel relief instead of humiliation. Because you've realized that being wrong is just the moment before being more right. And that's not a loss. That's growth. But releasing the need to be right opens space for something deeper, a kind of solitude that no longer frightens you. Sign number 2. You find peace in solitude, not loneliness. Most people fear solitude. They fill every silence with noise, television, music, scrolling, anything to avoid sitting with their own thoughts. But you've arrived at something different. You can spend Saturday morning with just coffee and silence, no agenda, no entertainment, and feel completely at peace. Not because you've given up on connection, but because you no longer need constant noise to prove you exist. My neighbor, Helen, used to panic when her husband traveled for work. She'd immediately make plans, dinners with friends, errands she didn't need to run, anything to fill the empty house. Then her husband took a 3-month contract overseas. At first, she did what she always did, filled every hour, but halfway through she got sick. Nothing serious, just enough that she had to cancel everything and stay home for a week. She told me later that's when it happened. She was making tea one morning, standing in her kitchen in complete silence, and realized she wasn't afraid anymore. "I was just there," she said, "and it was enough." When her husband returned, she'd stopped treating his absences like emergencies. Here's what advanced souls understand. Solitude isn't about rejecting people. It's about not needing them to complete you. You engage with others because you want to share your fullness, not because you're desperate to fill your emptiness. There's a fundamental difference. One creates connection. The other creates dependency. Seneca wrote, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you. But before you can choose relationships wisely, you must first be whole in your own company. Otherwise, you're not choosing connections. You're collecting distractions from yourself." Here's the marker. You can spend an entire evening alone without once checking your phone to see who's thinking of you. You don't need external validation to confirm you matter. The silence doesn't accuse you of being unwanted. It simply is. And in that simplicity, you've found something most people spend their whole lives avoiding: yourself, unfiltered and enough. If you're realizing you've become someone you didn't know you were becoming, comment "yes" below. Your recognition might help someone else see their own growth they've been too humble to claim. Solitude taught you stillness, but the third sign reveals what happens when that stillness meets chaos, and you choose a response your former self never could. Sign number 3. You respond, not react. There was a time when provocation meant instant reaction. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Rage floods your body before you've even thought about it. Someone criticizes you. Your defense is already forming before they've finished speaking. Your emotions ran you. You were a pinball bouncing off every trigger, controlled by whatever hit you last. But now there's space. Something happens, and instead of exploding or collapsing, you pause. You feel the anger, the hurt, the impulse, but you're no longer identical to those feelings. You can watch them rise and choose what comes next. I saw this shift in my brother after he became a father. He'd always been quick-tempered, someone who'd escalate any conflict into a shouting match within seconds. Then one afternoon, his toddler spilled an entire gallon of paint across the living room floor. We all braced for the explosion, but he just stood there, staring at the paint spreading across the hardwood, and took 3 slow breaths. Then he looked at his kid and said quietly, "Okay, let's clean this up together." Later, I asked him what happened. He said, "I felt the rage. It was there. But I also felt my son watching to see what I'd do. And I realized I had a choice: react like my father used to, or respond like the father I want to be. The anger didn't go away. I just didn't let it drive." That's the mark. Advanced souls don't eliminate emotions. They create distance from being consumed by them. You feel anger without becoming anger. You experience fear without letting fear decide. Between stimulus and response, there's a gap. And in that gap lives all your power. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." This is what he meant. The world will provoke you. People will disappoint you. Life will be unfair. None of that is in your control. But the space between what happens and what you do about it, that's entirely yours. And when you master that space, you become unshakable. Here's the test. When someone attacks you verbally and you can hear them fully without interrupting, feel the sting without lashing back, and then respond from clarity instead of woundedness, that's when you know. You're no longer controlled by what happens to you. You're authored by what you choose in response. Reaction is automatic. Response is chosen. And the third sign lives in that choice, made consciously every single time. But choosing your response is only possible when you've released something most people cling to, the need to fix everyone around you. Sign number 4, you've stopped trying to change people. There was a time when you couldn't watch people make mistakes without intervening. You'd see someone heading toward pain and feel compelled to stop them, giving advice they didn't ask for, solving problems that weren't yours, trying to save people from lessons they needed to learn. You told yourself it was love, compassion, helpfulness. But underneath it was something else, the belief that you knew better, that your way was the right way, and that people needed you to show them how to live. My friend Sarah spent years trying to change her younger sister. Her sister made questionable choices, dropped out of college, dated the wrong people, moved cities impulsively. Every family dinner became an intervention. Sarah would present evidence, make cases, outline better paths. She'd lose sleep worrying, make phone calls her sister wouldn't answer, send articles she knew wouldn't be read. It consumed her. Then one day, after another ignored piece of advice, Sarah's sister said something that shattered her. I never asked you to save me. I asked you to love me while I figure this out. Sarah sat with that for weeks. She realized she'd been so busy trying to fix her sister that she'd forgotten to actually be present with her. The next time they talked, Sarah just listened. Didn't fix, didn't advise, just witnessed. Her sister cried, thanked her for finally seeing her, and then made the same mistake Sarah had warned against. And for the first time, Sarah let her. Here's what advanced souls understand. People learn through their own experience, not your warnings. Your job isn't to prevent their pain. It's to be present if they need you after. Trying to change people is arrogance disguised as care. It says, I know your path better than you do, but you don't. You only know your own. Epictetus taught. Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. Let your life be the message, not your mouth. When you stop preaching and start living your truth quietly, something shifts. People who need your wisdom will ask for it. Those who don't are on a different journey, and that's not rejection, it's respect. Here's the marker. You can watch someone you love walk toward a cliff you've already fallen from, and instead of grabbing them, you simply say, I'm here if you need me. Not because you don't care, but because you've learned that saving people from their own growth is the cruelest thing you can do. Letting people be who they are, not who you need them to become. That's love. Everything else is control wearing compassion's mask. But releasing control over others only works when you understand something most people resist, that suffering isn't the enemy. Sign number 5. You understand suffering has purpose. Most people spend their lives avoiding suffering. They numb it, distract from it, blame others for it, or pretend it doesn't exist. But you've arrived at a different understanding. Pain isn't punishment, it's information. Suffering isn't the enemy. It's the teacher you kept refusing to listen to until it got loud enough that you had no choice. And now, when difficulty arrives, your first question isn't, why is this happening to me? It's, what is this trying to teach me? I watched this wisdom emerge in my father after he lost his business. He'd built it for 30 years, his identity, his pride, his entire sense of worth. When it collapsed during a recession, he disappeared into himself for months, bitter, angry, convinced life had betrayed him. But slowly, something shifted. He stopped asking why it happened and started asking what it revealed. The business had consumed him. He'd missed years of family moments chasing success that evaporated overnight. He told me one evening, sitting on his porch, losing everything was the only way I could see I'd built my life on the wrong foundation. I needed to fall apart to figure out what actually mattered. 2 years later, he started a smaller business, one that didn't own him. He worked less, lived more, and when I asked if he'd go back and prevent the collapse if he could, he said no. That pain made me someone I actually respect. I wouldn't trade who I became for what I lost. That's the transformation. Advanced souls don't see suffering as something that happened to them. They see it as something that happened for them. not in some cosmic plan way, but in the brutal, clarifying way that only breaking teaches you what you're actually made of. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Obstacles aren't diversions from your path, they are the path. The thing you're avoiding is the exact thing you need to face to become who you're meant to be." Here's the marker. You can look back at your hardest years, the ones that nearly destroyed you, and feel genuine gratitude. Not because you enjoyed the pain, but because you recognize the person you became through it is someone you wouldn't trade for an easier past. You've stopped wishing suffering away and started asking what it's revealing about where you need to grow. Pain is no longer the villain of your story, it's the forge, and you're what's being refined in the fire. If you've stopped resenting your pain and started thanking it for who it made you, comment "yes" below. Your transformation might give someone currently in the flames the hope to keep going. But accepting suffering's purpose requires something even rarer, the ability to live comfortably with the unknown. Sign number 6. You're comfortable with uncertainty. There was a time when uncertainty felt like danger. You needed plans, guarantees, clear outcomes before you'd move forward. The unknown terrified you because without control, you felt powerless. You'd map every detail, anticipate every obstacle, prepare for every contingency. And when life inevitably deviated from your script, you'd panic, convinced that anything unplanned meant something had gone wrong. My Aunt Linda lived this way for decades. She planned everything. Vacations scheduled a year out, retirement calculated to the dollar, backup plans for her backup plans. Then her husband died suddenly. No warning, no time to prepare. Every plan they'd made together evaporated overnight. For months, she was paralyzed. She'd built her entire sense of security on knowing what came next, and now nothing was knowable. But gradually, something unexpected happened. She stopped trying to rebuild the certainty. She started saying yes to invitations without knowing all the details. She booked a trip with only the flight arranged. She moved to a new city because it felt right, not because she'd researched it to death. When I asked her what changed, she said, "I realized I never actually had control. I just had the illusion of it, and maintaining that illusion was exhausting. Now I just respond to what is. And somehow, that's enough." That's the shift. Advanced souls understand that certainty is a story we tell ourselves to feel safe, but life doesn't operate on our timelines or guarantees. You can plan, prepare, do your due diligence, but at some point you have to step into the unknown anyway. And when you release the need to know, something paradoxical happens. You become more capable, not less. Because you're no longer spending all your energy trying to control the uncontrollable. You're adapting, responding, flowing. Epictetus taught, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." That's the practice. Control what you can, your effort, your attitude, your response. Everything else, let it unfold. Trust that you'll handle whatever comes, not because you've planned for it, but because you've learned you're capable of handling things you never saw coming. Here's the marker. Someone asks about your future, and you can honestly say, "I don't know," without anxiety creeping into your voice. You've made peace with the mystery. Not because you've given up, but because you've realized that certainty was never the goal. Presence is. And you can't be present when you're constantly trying to control what hasn't happened yet. Uncertainty isn't the enemy, rigidity is, and you've learned to bend without breaking. But comfort with uncertainty creates space for something even rarer, the ability to hold two opposing truths at the same time. Sign number 7. You can hold opposing ideas without conflict. Most people need the world to be simple, black or white, right or wrong, us or them. Nuance feels threatening because it demands you hold complexity without collapsing into certainty, but you've arrived somewhere different. You can believe someone is genuinely trying and still causing harm. You can acknowledge a system is broken and that individuals within it are doing their best. You can hold that someone hurt you deeply and that they were also hurting. You don't need to pick one truth and deny the other. You can stand in the tension of both are real without your mind short-circuiting. I learned this watching my mother navigate my parents' divorce. My father had an affair, clear betrayal, clear villain in the story we wanted to tell. But my mother refused the simple narrative. She'd say things that confused us as kids. What he did was wrong, and he's still a good father to you. I'm angry at him, and I understand why he felt so alone in the marriage. She held both truths simultaneously. His actions were harmful, and he was a complex human who'd made those choices from his own pain. It wasn't forgiveness that erased accountability. It was wisdom that refused to reduce a person to their worst moment while still naming the damage it caused. That's the mastery. Advanced souls understand that life is not a binary. Justice and mercy can coexist. Someone can be both victim and perpetrator. You can grieve what was lost and be grateful for what remains. The ability to hold paradox without needing to resolve it into simplicity, that's intellectual and emotional maturity most people never reach because it's deeply uncomfortable. It requires you to sit in ambiguity, to resist the soothing lie of certainty. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." Advanced souls live this. They recognize that multiple perspectives can be simultaneously valid, that truth is often layered, and that the need to be absolutely right about one interpretation usually means you're missing half the picture. Here's the test. You can listen to someone whose politics you despise and genuinely understand why they believe what they believe, not agree, but understand, without feeling like your own beliefs are threatened. You can say, "You're right," and "I'm also right," in the same conversation. You've stopped needing reality to be simple so you can feel secure in your position. Complexity doesn't destabilize you anymore. It deepens you. This is the sign most people miss, because it looks like weakness, like you can't make up your mind, but it's actually the ultimate strength. The ability to see the whole picture instead of just the part that confirms what you already believe. Certainty is seductive. Wisdom is nuanced. And you've chosen wisdom. If this is helping, subscribe. If someone you know needs this, share it. If it's worth your time, leave a like. Let's finish the final 4 signs. Sign number 8. You take responsibility without taking blame. Most people live in one of 2 extremes. Either they defend everything, never their fault, always circumstances, always someone else to blame, or they collapse under guilt. Every mistake becomes proof they're fundamentally broken. Every failure confirms they're worthless. But you've found the narrow path between the 2. You can say, "I was wrong," without saying, "I am wrong." You can take responsibility for your actions without taking on shame for your existence. I saw this in my former boss, Catherine. She led a project that cost the company significant money. Her decision, her call. When it failed, the executive team expected excuses, market conditions, bad timing, someone else's poor execution. Instead, she walked into that meeting and said, "This was my strategy. It didn't work. Here's what I learned and how I'll approach it differently next time." No defensiveness, no self-flagellation, just clean ownership. What struck me was what happened after. She didn't spend weeks beating herself up. Didn't spiral into, "I'm terrible at this." She extracted the lesson, adjusted her approach, and moved forward. One of the executives told me later, "That's the difference between someone who fails and learns and someone who fails and quits." She took responsibility without making it about her worth as a person. That's the distinction. Responsibility says, "I did this, and I'll handle the consequences." Shame says, "I did this, therefore I'm defective." One creates growth, the other creates paralysis. Advanced souls understand the difference. They can admit fault without their entire self-concept collapsing, Because they've learned that actions and identity are not the same thing. You can do something wrong without being something wrong. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." Part of being one is owning when you fall short, not to punish yourself, but to correct course. Self-awareness without self-destruction. Accountability without annihilation. Here's the marker. Someone points out a mistake you made, and your first instinct isn't to defend or collapse, it's to assess. Is this true? If yes, you say, "You're right, I'll fix it," and you move on. No shame spiral. No need to prove you're still good despite the error. You've separated behavior from being, and that separation is freedom most people never find because they can't bear the difference between "I made a mistake" and "I am a mistake." Responsibility without shame is mastery, and it opens the door to something even more profound, making peace with the one certainty no one escapes. Sign number 9. You've made peace with death. Most people live as if death is theoretical, something that happens to others, something far away, something they'll deal with when it comes. But you've internalized a truth most spend their lives avoiding. Your time here is finite, not in a morbid, depressing way, in a clarifying, focusing way. The awareness of death has made you more alive, not less. You don't waste time on arguments that don't matter. You don't postpone what's important. You say, "I love you," because you know the chance to say it isn't guaranteed. My grandfather embodied this after his first heart attack. He was 72, survived, but barely. When he came home, something had shifted. He started showing up differently, called family more, said what he meant instead of dancing around it, stopped wasting weekends on obligations he resented. One day I asked him what changed. He said, "I used to think I had time to fix things later. Now I know later isn't promised. So I live like this might be it. Not frantically, just honestly. I stopped saving my life for some future that might never come." That's memento mori. Remember, you will die. The Stoics practiced it daily, not to become depressed, but to become present. When you know time is limited, you stop spending it carelessly. You choose your battles. You forgive faster. You love harder. Death stops being the thing you fear and becomes the thing that teaches you how to live. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now." Let that determine what you do and say and think. Not tomorrow. Right now. What would you do differently if you knew this was your last year, last month, last conversation? Advanced souls live from that question, not desperately but deliberately. Here's the marker. You can think about death without panic. You can say, "I'm going to die someday," and feel urgency, not terror, because you've realized death isn't the tragedy. Unlived life is, and you're not waiting anymore. Peace with mortality makes room for something quietly powerful, giving without needing applause. Sign number 10. You give without needing recognition. Most people give in ways that can be seen. They announce their generosity, post their good deeds, make sure everyone knows they helped, not you. You've discovered that the deepest satisfaction comes from giving when no one's watching, when there's no applause, no credit, no reward except knowing you were useful to someone who needed it. You help because it aligns with who you are, not because it improves how others see you. My neighbor does this. For 3 years, I watched someone leave groceries on the porch of an elderly woman down the street every Sunday morning. No note, no name, just basic staples, bread, milk, eggs, coffee. The woman would find them, bring them inside, and I'd see her look around, trying to figure out who. One day, I saw my neighbor placing the bags early in the morning. I asked him about it later. He shrugged. "She's on a fixed income. I have extra. That's it." When I suggested he tell her it was him so she could thank him properly, he looked uncomfortable. That would make it about me. It's not about me. He's still doing it. She still doesn't know, and he's never mentioned it again. That's the shift. Kindness stops being a transaction where you give and expect recognition in return. It becomes something you do because your values demand it, regardless of whether anyone notices. No resentment when you're not thanked. No need to broadcast your generosity. You give and let go of credit, of praise, of needing the person to know it was you. Seneca wrote, "Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness." Advanced souls see those opportunities and take them quietly. They don't need witnesses to validate their goodness. The act itself is enough. Here's the marker. You've done something generous recently that no one but you knows about. Not because you're hiding it, but because announcing it would cheapen it. You gave because someone needed, and you could. That's the equation. Everything else, recognition, gratitude, credit, is noise you've learned to ignore. Anonymous kindness is the purest form, because it proves your goodness isn't a performance. It's who you are when no one's watching. But giving without recognition only sustains when you understand the final sign, trusting the process even when it's painful. The 11th and final sign of an advanced soul, you've stopped fighting what is and started trusting what's unfolding. Most people resist difficulty. When life gets hard, they rage against it, demanding to know why this is happening, convinced they're being punished, certain something has gone terribly wrong. But you've arrived at something different. You still feel the pain, you still struggle. But underneath it, there's trust. Trust that even when you can't see the purpose, there is one. Trust that the universe isn't random chaos, but a process unfolding according to laws you don't fully understand, but don't need to control. My sister went through this during infertility, 5 years of trying, treatments that failed, hopes raised and crushed repeatedly. I watched her oscillate between fighting reality and surrendering to it. Then something shifted. She told me, I can keep asking why me and make myself miserable, or I can trust that my life is unfolding exactly as it needs to, even when it doesn't make sense. I don't know why this is my path, but fighting it isn't changing it. All it's doing is adding suffering to pain. She stopped the treatments, focused on other parts of life. 6 months later, she got pregnant naturally, no intervention, no explanation. She doesn't call it a miracle, she calls it timing. It happened when I stopped trying to force it and started trusting it would happen if it was meant to. That's the final sign. Advanced souls have learned to surrender without giving up. They don't become passive. They stay engaged. They take action. They try. But they release the demand that life conform to their timeline, their plan, their understanding of how things should go. They trust the process, even when the process is painful, especially when it's painful, because they've learned that resistance to reality multiplies suffering. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Accept whatever comes to you, woven in the pattern of your destiny, for what could more aptly fit your needs? Not what you wanted, what you needed." And sometimes you only understand the difference looking back. Here's the marker. You're going through something difficult right now, and instead of spending all your energy asking, why is this happening? You're asking, what is this teaching me? You haven't given up. You've just stopped fighting the current and started learning to swim with it. Trust without proof, faith without certainty, surrender without defeat. That's the final sign. And it's the hardest one to reach because it requires you to let go of the one thing humans cling to most: control over how your life unfolds. If you recognized yourself in these signs, don't let it become pride. Advanced souls know they're always students. The moment you think you've arrived is the moment growth stops. If this showed you how far you've come, subscribe. Share it with someone who's further along than they realize. Sometimes people need permission to acknowledge their own transformation. Leave a like so others searching for validation can find this. Remember, you didn't become an advanced soul by accident. You became one through every difficult choice you made to evolve instead of staying comfortable. That's not luck. That's earned, and it's worth honoring.